going to start off at the end here with Fergus. So I'll hand you over to Fergus and he can tell you about himself.
Thanks. It's too close. My name is Fergus Weldon. I lead the data science team here at Trainline. I've been here since last May, I think. So not that long. I originally started my data science career not really as a data scientist, but as an analyst at dunnhumby. Some of you might have heard. And actually before that I worked at Ofgem, the energy regulator, for a brief time. From there I progressed into a company called Nielsen, which is a big US kind of consultancy, reseller of data, etc., and I worked with some of the big retail companies over there, so Safeway, Walmart, etc., on kind of big data projects. I did a brief stint at a company called Wonga that nobody's ever heard of, and came here.
Hello, I'm Tom. I gave a little brief introduction at the beginning of my presentation, but I've spent 20 years in government. Prior to that, I also worked at Safeway, but I was a trolley boy, so not as exciting as your job. Those were the best days of my life. I got 50 quid a week, and I managed to get shit-faced like 4 or 5 times. It was brilliant. But yeah, no, I've spent the last 20 years in government doing a variety of roles, mostly with data. I've helped develop data warehouses. Some worked, some didn't. And I've spent about 8 years, I think, in total as a stats analyst, doing a variety of... My job title was stats analyst, but I did everything. I did like kind of operational research stuff, economics, statistics, some sciencey stuff. It was really good fun. Before taking the plunge and becoming DFT's principal data scientist, which is the job I have now. So, an interesting fact, I do know a data scientist at the British Museum. So that's an interesting fact for you.
Hello, I'm Gianluca, and yeah, gave a bit of an introduction previously. So I've spent most of my life, about the last 4 months, in academia, doing undergrad, masters in kind of stats operations research, and then a PhD here in London at Imperial College, where I then stayed for my postdoc. And end of last year, kind of October time more or less, decided that I had enough and left. Went to do something very different. So I was in medical research, epidemiology, and biostats, which is what I did my PhD in, kind of genomics, broadly speaking, and decided to just go and do gambling, which sparked quite a few questions. So I just found the problem really interesting. There's a lot of interesting and strange problems. So there's a lot of research, which is what I enjoy, a lot of non-traditional modeling, if you want. I guess for me, the other thing was the small environment, so there's a lot of non-tech reasons behind my decision. The fit, if you want to call it that, with the company, with the people. Went there, did a full day on-site interview, really liked them. They must have really liked me, I imagine, and that's what happened.
Very briefly, I'm David, and I'm the founder at Data Idols. So I was a SQL Server DBA for about 13 years, and about 5 years ago I made the crazy move of moving into the world of recruitment with the idea of adding data knowledge to the process. So I've got a little bit of a mixed background in terms of I kind of understand recruitment from both sides. So I think from the panel what we're going to see is obviously a couple of very senior hiring managers, so it'd be good to get their opinion. Also, obviously, we're lucky to have Gianluca, who's very recently made the move from academia, and I think with myself, I've kind of experienced the recruitment from both sides of things. So hopefully, between all of us, you should get quite a diverse set of answers. So as I said, we're going to kick off with a couple of pre-prepared questions. If you guys have an immediate urge to, with a question, please put your hands up. Let's get involved. Boom. We've got 2 already. Can we do the pre-prepared ones? No, there is no pre-prepared questions. Where is Charlotte? Come on, give that man a mic. I could be in trouble here, actually. I'm regretting everything.
Yeah, thanks. Do you think it's worth investing into learning more of statistics and probability and algorithms? Or let's put it another way, does being more experienced in mathematics give you more sort of intuition and gut feeling about the problems, or does it just come from trial and error?
Do any of you have an immediate urge to jump in? If not, I'm giving it to you, Fergus. Well done, Tom.
I don't. I mean, in my job, the last 2 years I've not done a great deal of maths. But what I would say to you is, what do you want to do? Why do you want to learn the maths? I mean, data science is such a huge field, and that you can't hope to learn it all. What you'll see is when you do look at jobs that come up or fields that you want to work in, some of them will have very specific skill sets like machine learning or Hadoop and Spark. And if you want to work in like a more mathematical kind of algorithm, machine learning thing, then by all means learn maths. But I would say it very much depends upon your kind of career goals and your personal goals as well.
Can I say something contrary to that?
Yes, of course you can.
I would say there's probably one of the foundational blocks that you need. And it also goes back to what you said about how much banging your head against the wall you want to do. Because if you attempt to use something out of scikit-learn and it's not giving you the answers that you really want, you've got no kind of intuition of how to diagnose the problem. So you could be there for quite a long time banging your head. So I would say and I don't usually say things like this about data science. As you said, it's quite broad, but having that basic understanding of math, statistics, both frequentist and Bayesian, is really important. And how you get that, really up to you, but it's definitely something that I, as a hiring manager, would look for.
I have to say I agree with the second opinion. Not with Tom, sorry. Maybe less strongly in the sense that I think you do need a good understanding of it. Perhaps not to the point where, if you, again, it depends, as Tom was saying, on what you're going to go and do. The degree of maths that you're going to need and use in your job. But definitely, to avoid unnecessary head banging, it's probably a very good kind of guide in that. And again, yeah, something we look for, but it's a very specific type of skill.
And do you think you guys are talking there about maths specifically, or are you talking broader about educational background? Do you think it's important to have got to a certain level of education in a certain type of subject to move into data science, or what's your opinion on that?
Reverse order. I don't actually think that, again, depending on where you go and work, perhaps there are some industries, finance comes to mind, even though there's fintech nowadays, where the piece of paper, having the right track records, if you want, is more important. But I guess a lot of startups will just call you in, give you an exercise if you can demonstrate that you can do things and that you can learn. More importantly, then job is yours. So from that point of view, I wouldn't be too worried. Also, data science masters weren't a thing 3-4 years ago, which means not many people have them. So from that point of view, I guess anything which is broadly quantitative works very well. But again, you might find the hot history, say graduate, as was one of my examples, moving to data. I wouldn't find that strange at all.
I don't have a degree in a STEM subject, and I've got by. I think there's so many ways in which you can learn nowadays. I mean, there's YouTube, there's the MOOCs, there's all that kind of stuff. I think that there's, you don't need to have the piece of paper anymore if you can prove you've done it other ways, like things like GitHub, having kind of examples and stuff that you've done. I think that's probably counts for more in this day and age than like qualifications.
Yeah, I think I would agree with both of the other guys. What I would say though is that some companies might not take such a liberal approach at screening your CV. So let's say if you didn't have a degree, or if you didn't have a master's and they specifically asked for something along those lines, then you might not even get in the door. So it's just something to consider at the screening process.
Okay, I agree. Perfect. Next question. There's a hand up already. We'll go for the guy in the middle, and then we'll come to the two guys in the front row after.
Thank you. Just wondering what your guys' opinions are on, would you prefer to sort of deep dive into a problem and have it for 2 or 3 years maybe, sort of getting into the nuances of that, or do you prefer to sort of move between problems, get the problem 90% solved and then perhaps move on to a different area, a different industry, to like consulting? sort of model? Just wondering your guys' opinions on
I think that's a good question, and actually adding to that, I think in terms of what we see as an agency is that quite often people are in a data science role for 18 months, 2 years and move on. And I think that probably ties in, so it'd be good if we could get your opinion on, you know, the life expectancy in a role and stuff like that as well. So I'm going to start with Fergus, and we're going to work. Actually, no, let's go to Tom. I like Tom. He's very opinionated. I've worked it out already.
I spent in my previous role. I spent 5 years in my previous role doing the same job, although it had different kind of aspects to it over time. In my current job, I've got a real challenge on my hands for the next year, but the job has changed from when I started it. So when I started, it was just me. Now I'm managing a team. I'm going to be managing a team of 20 people, and I kind of think that I've maybe got, a year and a half of doing that before I'm going to be moving on. I take it you mean in terms of when you say a problem, you mean like a kind of career, or do you mean like a specific data science problem, like my algorithm doesn't work, or I think I don't know. I'm getting on a bit now, and I kind of want to try and experience kind of different industries and that kind of stuff as well. So that plays into it too.
It's very dependent on the kind of area you work in. So academia, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years if you want to. Consultancy, you might have a slightly longer period. Somewhere like healthcare, a longer period again, but somewhere commercial, like let's say Facebook, Google, Trainline, eBay, you're talking weeks. Like you really have to choose. If you choose to be a commercial data scientist, then you have to be happy with very good and not let excellent get in the way. And you can't be somebody who wants to develop like sophisticated algorithms that take months and months and months and publish papers all the time. If that's your core want out of a job, then a commercial role is probably not the place to be.
I probably have very little experience compared to the kind of combination to my left, but if I can add to that, I was into academia where, as Fergus was saying, the time scale is plus infinity normally, and it's good in the sense that it gives you a lot of freedom to explore, but at the same time, I did some side consultancy and really enjoyed that, because if it's a good project, then you kind of enjoy it while it lasts. If it's not a good project, then it doesn't last very long. So.
Okay, thank you. And this chap in the front row.
Thanks. Assuming that everyone had the minimum sort of skill set for being a data scientist, we could all do Python or whatever. What other things out beyond that really kind of like makes a difference between whether you'll hire someone or not? So what are the other things outside of the minimum technical skills that you're looking for when you're hiring?
Okay, I think that relates to your first talk actually, Gianluca, so it makes sense to start with you.
Okay. We're actually trying all permutations, that's what you don't know. That's the exercise. I guess the main thing we were looking for, and this was very much a learning experience for me, this hiring process we've been going through, is to see whether when you're faced with a new problem, which is, here's what we do, simplified version of course, how do you approach the problem? And it's very interesting to see how different people react to this. There's some people who try to kind of redirect and reformulate the problem into what's familiar. There's some people that just try a completely different approach. There's some people just ask you a lot of questions. Some people don't ask you any questions. So there's no right approach, I guess. But normally you can see whether someone has that intuition or that spark or that potential. So for me specifically, I guess that would be assuming, as you said, that all the rest is in place. That would be the main criterion there. We did this before.
I think, for me, I've seen it so many times in government where people tend to build teams in their own image. So I would look for someone that brings something like the soft skills slightly different to the table than me. But that said, I do like people to have enthusiasm. And I do think, when we give people a data science job, as a data scientist in government, which are really in demand, I expect to see them kind of really want it and really kind of grasp it with both hands. So that I think that enthusiasm and energy is important. But also soft skills like planning and organising, the ability to kind of talk in front of a crowd. I think those kind of things are really important as well. And like I said before, I think the importance of having, maybe devoting a proportion of, this is we're all here today in our own time. You know, having a kind of interest in it outside of your kind of role as well is important as well. So,
I suppose I'll speak specifically to kind of commercial roles. And I'll give you one technical and one kind of soft skill. The technical skill would be develop your software engineering skills. More and more of what I see now is that data scientists, their main constraint is going to be actually getting something out to the public. And if you're developing something that's going to touch a lot of people, then you're going to require some form of software engineering skills to be able to do that. And an understanding of the basic software engineering principles would really kind of stand you different to everybody else. The second would be being able to tell a story. We deal with complicated questions, complicated data all the time. It's our job. And if you can't communicate that to stakeholders like CEOs, CTOs, CFOs, or even your boss, then you're going to find it very hard. You're going to find it very hard to get through kind of a rigorous recruitment process for a data science position. Specifically for Trainline, that's something we definitely look for, because we kind of encourage people to kind of go out into the business and talk to stakeholders, and we want to be confident that they can actually do that on our behalf.
I kind of want to follow on from that actually, because I think it's a very good point, and it's something that we come across at Data Idols in terms of every data science role is different. You know, lots of companies are trying to hire data scientists, but what you're calling a data scientist is all completely different for the 3 different companies. And I think a big part of that is getting your head around what you're trying to hire from the agency perspective I'm talking. So we have to understand the client and what they're trying to hire. And they're all looking for different soft skills. So my question then is, how do you think candidates can get that across in a CV? So you've got a clear picture of what you're looking for a commercial data scientist, and you know you've got a clear picture at the DFT. It can be difficult to get that across at the screening stage with a CV. So all of you guys are going to send your CV to employers and agencies. Do you guys have any opinion on how best to get that across in a CV, or how to format a CV as a data scientist? No one's putting their hand up.
I'll go for it.
Go for it.
Be brave. Okay, for the tech skills, make sure they are easy to read because they need to be there, especially if they are in the job ad, make sure that we can actually see them. For the soft skills, a bit more difficult, of course. I think participating in events, presenting, it doesn't need to be a very big thing, but there's meetups in London pretty much every other day. So even just taking time to do some site analysis, go there, present, share it with people, I guess can be seen very favorably. And that's a simple one. Again, depends on your kind of industry. I think teaching specifically for myself was a good way of highlighting this, because if you teach people, you probably are quite accustomed to talking in front of them and interacting with them a lot. So that helped me, but yeah, might be different in other industries.
I will say I'm the worst person to ask about CVs, because my CV is shocking and I've not had to use it since 1998. So don't listen to anything I say about CVs. But that said, I did do some interviewing for a data science role recently. And what struck me was everyone was so keen to get across how good they were at algorithms and the kind of the technical aspects of the job. When we were actually asking about soft skills, we were asking them about how they planned and organised a project. And a lot of people missed the point of what we were getting at. And we were trying to see how you plan and organise yourself around, like when we said, I'll ask a question, what do you do if you've got 2 conflicting deadlines? And so many people say, I would just end up doing both. And it's like, well, that's not the question. You know, I'm trying to get a feel for how you're going to prioritise your work in a difficult circumstance. So I would say this, it's a lot easier to get across interview, but don't neglect that side of it, because that's really important. And when all other things being equal, we will take someone, we will employ someone who delivers better on that part of the interview or the CV or whatever.
I suppose the only thing I'd really say is consider the job spec and the kind of what it's asking you, and frame your CV and frame your cover letter to reference that. And if they're talking about soft skills, make sure you highlight those elements. Or if they're talking about technical skills, make sure you just highlight it. If you're sending one CV to 500 companies, then you're doing it wrong.
That was a good point, definitely. We had a question here. Come on.
So my question is regarding the next stage. So we were talking about basic skills and what else would you need to have in order to be like a great data scientist, the one that you would like to hire. Now let's talk about the next stage. Like what kind of person would you hire for a senior level, or who would you get promoted to a senior level? And I can imagine there are many types of senior data scientists. So if you can also and develop your answer regarding what categories there are and what the skills would lead to each specific career path, that would be very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with Fergus on this one. I've got a feeling he's got opinion here.
So in my head, I can see the answer. What I would say is that a lot of the differentiating is not going to be educational. It's not going to be a PhD. In my eyes, shouldn't get you a senior data scientist position unless it's academic specific. Like if you're an NLP expert, then you might get a senior data science position in an NLP company based on that. But in a commercial sense, it's going to be more about experience and that you've got a proven track record of actually helping the company succeed. And what I would look for is you being able to articulate that to me. So in an interview stage, I would ask you concisely, how have you helped the business? And then we'd pick one or two of those examples and go through them in detail. And we talk about what goals and KPIs that were set up to measure your success against that. That's really the big main one. There's a bunch of other checks that you would go through just to make sure that, you know, there's kind of like a checklist for data scientists and another increased checklist for senior data scientists. That's probably the biggest one for me, is experience.
That's a really good question, actually. For me, I place a really high premium on my time. I have, when you've got a snazzy job title and you work for the public transport and you don't have a massive team, you do get a lot of people who want a piece of your time. Some of those will be your staff, or your people, sorry, and they're the people who you should kind of devote the most time to. But that said, I mean, I would try and promote people who are proactive. And there's a guy called Randy Pausch. Has anyone ever heard of him? Yeah, he delivered a really good talk called The Last Lecture on things like time management. And there's a quote that stuck with me there. There was two things, I suppose, the quote. The first one was someone who thinks that brick walls are there to stop other people. So I don't want to hear about every time you've got a problem or that kind of thing. I just want to hear about how you solved it. I've forgotten the second one now. No, it's gone, sorry. But yeah, it's kind of about being proactive, managing your time effectively. And yeah, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. I don't want to hear, if you have to ask me the question as to, should I do this or not, you probably already know the answer. And that's the kind of person that I want to employ. I don't want someone who's going to have to be kind of looked after because I simply don't have the time to do it.
Can I say I'm in no position, so thank you.
Thank you, guys. Does anybody else have a question? Oh, there's good questions. Well, the guy waving. If you wave, you definitely get the mic, Nick. So the chap in the white shirt that was waving, wave again, wave again.
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, okay. Cool.
Hello.
So I read somewhere that data scientists spend 80% of their time cleaning data. To what extent is that true, based on your experience and experience that you know from other data scientists, and to what extent is it boring, would you say?
Got a feeling.
Or not boring.
They've all got opinions on this, I can tell. Go on.
Okay. I spend 80% of my time doing bureaucracy and paperwork. But if I didn't spend 80% of my time doing bureaucracy and paperwork, I would spend 80% of my time cleaning data, and I love cleaning data. That's what I like doing. That's the kind of thing. I think that's where, I spent most of my career doing stuff like that, and that's what I really enjoy. I get a kick out of a really nice, clean data set with variable names that mean something, with a nice index on it, that I can then just go away and analyse. But unfortunately, I don't get the chance to do that anymore because I'm too busy doing paperwork. So, yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Is your boss here?
No. Oh shit, this is being filmed. Oh.
Yes and no. If your data science team is new, right? If you're in a startup, let's say, and you're the first data scientist in, 100% of your time is going to be devoted to chasing people about getting correct data, or understanding the data, or asking them what does this mean, or asking them where's that bit of data. And a more mature company, some of the bigger companies like Google and Facebook, they already have big data engineering teams, big data teams that look after the data for you, so the data scientists and the data analysts can just do their work. So it all depends on where you land. At least here, when we first started, it was a little bit more of the startup, but because we also have quite a good engineering team, it's more like a Google and Facebook now, where we can just turn on our machines and the data's there and ready, and we can see yesterday's data. There's no missing data. Everything is as it should be. So it really depends on where you go.
Yeah, I have to agree with this, having seen both sides from here's the data from the sequencer, go and do your thing, to now being treated very well, as in my data is completely clean and beautiful, because the company spent a lot of time, just invested a lot of effort and resources into doing that. But I agree with Tom, it's actually quite a pleasurable experience. And you kind of learn all the different quirks of the data set and find out things which perhaps are contrary to your assumptions, and report them back to people and ask them why. That's always interesting.
Thank you. So I think the answer was it's universally enjoyable, and you have to do it. Cool. No. There was at least another 4 arms, so where are we going to go? I'm going to take one more this side, because Charlotte's there, and then we're going to come over this side to get her Fitbit steps up for the month. So, hello.
All right, thanks. So you guys are quite experienced in data science. So I just wonder, what is your vision about data science in the next few years? In the past few years, we could see a dramatic change in data science. A few years back, probably we still talk about Bayesian classifiers, and nowadays everyone basically fancy about deep neural networks and just apply the algorithm, and then you get a result. And actually, I attended the talk last night, and the last speaker basically so that now deep learning, so they basically will just build up a black box, and then you just input, and then you get a result. And how do you see data science in the next few years? And how do you think about science in data science here? Do we have science there, or we just put it in the black box?
Okay, that is a very good question, and I'm glad you've asked it, because it was on my list, and I didn't think I was going to get any of them. So, okay, guys, where is data science going, and what should these lovely people be focusing on in terms of the next thing?
Okay. I don't know. In terms of tech, there's hype cycles for everything. As you said, neural networks are now back in the spotlight from the 80s, so it's nothing new. Now we can do them better, but the ideas, at least the basic ideas, have been there for a while. So I don't really know for that. Perhaps if I have to take a very wild guess, is getting models that we can actually explain. There's a bit of regulation in EU, at the EU level as well, for this. Whether it will touch us or not is a mystery. But maybe kind of being able to explain to people, to stakeholders and to people what the output of the model is, or why the model outputs what it does. But to this, and this is the real answer now, I would add that perhaps we need to find some sort of societal way of dealing with data, because we've been building all of this up, and a lot of our decisions and an increasing number of decisions will be taken by machines now that are just trained. So there's some research in trying to avoid bias. For instance, if you're doing, say, to have credit checks or something like that. But there's still a lot more to be done there. Also, I guess, in terms of numeracy from the general public, which doesn't really understand science, and this is a big problem of academia, and I guess it kind of translates to data science as well.
I think data science itself is quite hyped up. I didn't do anything specific in my career to migrate from an analyst to where I am now, apart from develop my skills. I would say probably the biggest shift that we'll see in the next 3 years is data science being seen as a core competency in almost every company. And kind of companies being more open and adaptive to that. I think what a lot of companies is happening now is that they're failing to prove worth from things like artificial intelligence and deep learning. They're doing it in startups because it's trendy, and then they tell their investors, yes, I've got an artificial intelligence strategy, and then 12 months down the line, when they run out of money, they say, oh, why didn't it work? Well, you know, the data scientists couldn't do anything because they spend 100% of their time cleaning the data, right? So I think the field itself, while algorithms are very trendy and sexy to talk about deep learning and neural networks and recursive learning and et cetera, they're all tools to do your job as a data scientist. Your job as a data scientist is not to program R. That's a programming problem. That's a programming job. Your job is to answer questions, and you use these tool sets to do that. So we'll move away from this idea where we're just here to apply algorithms to generic problems, to actually moving away from that into a paradigm where we are seen as kind of experts at applying these tool sets to complicated problems.
I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle because part of my job is about software development, and I would classify, perhaps in contrast to the two guys beside me, I would classify software development as quite a core data science skill, but I'm aware that a lot of people don't. And there's a lot of really good stuff going on in that kind of world. You know, you've had things like Docker kind of come out in the last couple of years that have really kind of helped make software development a lot easier to deploy and run ship apps. And I think we're probably going to see slightly more of that, or hopefully going to see slightly more of that in data science. But the one thing I would take issue with is that when you asked the question, you said experienced data scientists, and I certainly don't feel that way about myself. I've been doing this job 2 years. I've literally got no idea what's going to happen. And yeah, I think that's from my own kind of biased perspective. I think maybe the more kind of, more of the software development kind of stuff is maybe going to come to the fore. I don't know.
Thank you very much. That was a good question. Well done. We had a question over on this side. So, well done, Charlotte. Round of applause.
Yes, thank you for sharing all your experiences. I have a question for Tom. Actually, it's about, if I understand correctly, you had lots of experience before, but then you were given like a blank sheet in this role, like building a data science function in the Department for Transport, which is not a small fish. So how do you approach when you are given such a massive role? How do you approach that task? You start by yourself, and you have to understand how people work within that massive organization. You need to understand what of the things that have been done there are already useful and can be brought into that function. And how do you set your own goals, your targets? Who manages you in that situation as well? So,
are you happy to answer this one? Yeah, should we get Gianluca to do it?
What shall I say?
I would say, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, and I would say the first thing I would say is no one does anything alone. You can't expect to do it yourself. You've got to make friends, find allies, and get people to do stuff for you. And that's the kind of the main lesson I've learned over the last 2 years. And whereas before, if I got given a big pile of work, I'd think, oh shit, how am I going to do this? Now I get given a big pile of work, I think, right, who can I delegate this to? Who's going to kind of... I'm not being flippant when I say that. I think, you've got to make friends. You've got to start achieving through other people. And it's also, you've also got to focus. You can't try and do everything at once. One of the first things I wanted to do was get a Hadoop cluster set up. And I kind of thought that'd be really cool for us to have a Hadoop cluster. And it's like, well, what are we going to use it for? We haven't got any data big enough to warrant kind of putting in it. So it's kind of trying to focus on what's important, the right here, right now, but keep one eye on the future as well. And just kind of try not to get too daunted by the size of the task ahead of you.
I don't know, it might be interesting to hear from the other two guys. Yeah, definitely. You've done similar stuff building teams. What's your approach?
Get good at making friends and buying them coffee. And just, if you need something from somebody, don't go to their desk empty-handed. I find donuts work quite well.
That's so true. That's so true.
Probably the biggest thing to success is just prioritizing. and communicating and managing upwards. So I'm very much of the mindset is that my job is to help everybody around me succeed, but also my boss succeed. And if everybody else around me succeeds and my boss succeeds, then I implicitly succeed. And whatever you need to do to make that happen, and it's usually prioritization of tasks, then you should succeed.
We're not really much experience in building teams, nowhere near these guys, but perhaps another important thing from the point of view of someone who's been in a team is to manage expectations. So kind of being able to mediate, especially if you're the only person doing data magic, data wizardry, then perhaps be able to communicate and sometimes even stop. People get very excited very, very easily because they don't understand it. And that's, I guess, an important soft skill to have as well, on top of being able to communicate the good, but also the limits.
They've made that sound very easy, haven't they? Definitely. Yeah. We'll take one more. Senior there, Charlotte. Come on.
Yeah, and one of the past presentations, somebody mentioned about working with people that have low knowledge of statistics. I'm going to go a step further and discuss a situation that quite often happened to me, that I got to work with people that not only didn't know statistics, but didn't know their jobs well. And they would often come with some requests that didn't really add business value, ask you to do some sort of low value work, or like high cost for us, or low business value work. How do you deal with this kind of situations?
Okay, so I think that probably comes up quite a lot in a lot of companies, because I'm guessing the guys that manage the data are the guys that can perhaps more often than not direct the business rather than the business direct the data guys. So how do you guys go about doing that? And I'll start with you, Fergus, and come back.
I suppose one of the first things I had to learn was to help whoever was asking you the question actually understand if their question was actually really what they were asking. Because there's nothing worse than somebody asking you something that they don't really understand, you giving them something and they're going, well, that's not what I asked for, because you've just wasted everybody's time. So one of the skills you kind of have to develop is kind of being curious but also investigative and asking, well, what are you really looking for? Instead of somebody coming to you, let me take a step back. What used to happen to me quite a lot in consultancy is somebody 3 levels above me would ask a question, and then that would pass down the chain. And that would change slightly every time it passed somebody's ears. And then by the time I got to me, I got a 4th version of it, and I'd do that, and then I'd go all the way back to the top, and it'd be like, well, what's this? So really start to understand, help them understand what they're really asking for, probably. I find that really helps. It helps also to have, I suppose, being able to quantify how much work and effort is going to cost to answer that question. So having a methodology for actually sizing these tasks really does help, because if something costs quite a lot, but actually you're not getting very much from it, then obviously you shouldn't be doing it.
I would say I can count on, throughout my career is like 20 years as an analyst, I can count on one hand the number of times that someone's asked me for something that they actually need. And often we have a motto, we say don't give them what they ask for, give them what they need. And it's about trying to understand the requirement. Because often they will have quite a good reason for doing something, but they'll ask you for something stupid like an Excel spreadsheet that does this, and you're like, what do you want an Excel spreadsheet for? And you actually start to discuss it with them and get to the bottom of the requirement. It's like, well, yeah, I can see why you would want that. The other thing is, I would say occasionally we all have to do work that we don't necessarily believe in. But what I always try and do, I try and make sure that they know that I'm doing this as a kind of, I will say to them, I'm really sorry, but I don't agree that this is a priority, but I'm going to do it anyway, because you've asked me to do it. And when you say stuff like that, you do generate a little bit of goodwill. That is, if they don't hit you, you do generate a little bit of kind of goodwill and saying that, you know what, I trust you. And we all have to kind of do silly stuff from time to time for important people. It's just about how you go about it and how you conduct yourself, and you might find that you earn yourself a few favours along the way taking that approach.
Yeah, totally understand. So part of the consultant's job, I guess, so the very important part is recasting the problem and helping whoever the customer might be, internal or external, understand what they actually want. So in this sense, maybe it's similar to software engineering when you try and figure out what the requirements are from users. They don't normally know what they want. They have some vague idea, but there's a lot going on there to try and write that down in something that you can then program or do in terms of analysis.
Thank you very much. I think if we say 3 more questions, we've been going about 45 minutes now, I think.
4 more hands. 5 more hands, we can leave some kind of algorithm to pick up.
Wow. You've made that really awkward. Right. We're doing 5 more questions. And that's it. So keep your hands up or something. I don't know. No more. Oh, God. The lady in the middle, she had her hand up. Come on. It is the first lady. That is a very good point. That's an absolutely amazing point, because I went to an FT diversity meeting last week and I've asked questions of men everywhere and I'm going to get lynched in the office in the morning. So we need more female questions. Well done. Sorry.
Does it mean I'll get a t-shirt?
You can have a t-shirt.
Great.
Well done. Well done for asking. That's what they say, lean in. I've read lean in. Lean in, ask for a t-shirt. Perfect.
All right, on a different note, I guess everyone will agree that we're going through some sort of data science hype, right? There's a combination of big data revolution and shortage of talent. We need data scientists and we're ready to pay them very well for the work they do, hoping that this investment will be returned and more in the future, which is not always the case. So my question is, do you think that readiness to pay a lot to someone who has just a title data scientist is justified? And also if you see any end of it anytime soon?
That is a good question. We should have had women asking questions a lot earlier in the evening. So, wow, I don't really know where to start with that one. So Tom does. Come on.
I think in terms of just trying to be more data-driven, I try not to get too hung up on the term data scientist because it's such a big thing and encompasses stuff like data analyst. I think the world we live in now is a world of data. And I think, I personally don't think that we're paying people who deal with data too much because they're the people that make the world go round. That said, as you said, data science does have an element of hype associated with it. And yeah, I don't feel qualified to say whether that's going to end anytime soon, but it does seem to be generating momentum. So for me, like working in government, I know I said before we're a bit late to the party. I see government kind of getting more and more into data science. I can't speak for outside and private industry.
Competition is fierce here for the mic. Yeah, I guess you're right in the sense that data analysis will become perhaps more of a commodity in the future as more and more people get the necessary skills. But as I was saying in my presentation earlier, I still think there's a big human component there which you cannot discount. So you can only automate data analysis so much. Till then you need to bring in the domain knowledge, the fact that you still need people to supervise and make sense of what the results are. Maybe I'll be proven wrong in 10 years. Hopefully not.
I think the hype is driving this artificial salary, honestly. I think companies actually don't know how to hire a data scientist. They don't know the questions to ask or the skill sets to really ask. They know they need a data scientist, but they don't really know why. And if you're asking for an absorbent amount of money, then they've got no idea, especially if they benchmark it against the market. They might get an artificial price. So I see that kind of staying for probably another couple of years while we're in this hype phase. I would say is that as you evolve as a data scientist, if you become a good data scientist and are able to deliver value, then it doesn't matter really what happens to the market. You will be seen as valuable, and your place and your salary will be justified. It'll be everybody else who'll have the impact, because it'll start to become very evident who's really got the skill sets, and companies will start to realize that a lot more. And people will realize it's not an easy job. I'm gonna fill out a bit on this. There's this idea of a citizen data scientist, about passing the power back to people who don't necessarily have data science skills. While that is all well and good, it's something that's quite dangerous. because a little knowledge is very, very dangerous in the world that we live in. And that can be even more dangerous if you're working in a kind of sensitive environment like healthcare or finance, or any of the other cybersecurity things like that. So I do think it's hyped up. I do think the salaries are driven by the hype, and I think it'll settle down maybe, I don't know, 5-10 years.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is that obviously when you're looking to make the step from academia into being a data scientist, obviously the salary is a big factor in it, but it shouldn't be the only factor. And as Fergus mentioned there's a lot of companies that need data scientists, but they don't really have a clear picture of why and what they're doing, and they're prepared to pay for that person. 6 months ago I had a meeting with a very big company that you would think really had their head screwed on with data, and they talk about building this data science team, and my first question was, well, why? You know, what are they going to do? And they genuinely didn't have an answer. And they had all this budget. It was literally, they wanted like 15 heads or something like that, you know, it was big. And if you'd taken that role, you'd have been very happy with the salary, but you'd have got in there and you'd have realised it wasn't the role for you. So, you know, salary is important, but it's not the only driver. And finding the, you know, an interesting company that's doing cool projects that pays a suitable amount of money, then that is worth it, in my opinion, and I'd definitely recommend that to everyone. So we had some questions this side. Oh, I'm going to run. That's what I'm going to do. We need this for the video, don't we? Okay, where were we? Who were the four? Because I feel like there's an extra hand. Oh, we want kudos. I'm coming back. This is like, we've gone the other way now, haven't we? This is crazy. Come on.
Actually, I've heard a lot of great insights about you guys on what you guys look for in data scientists. So, because it seems like every industry has their own data scientists, and ultimately, data scientists is to derive results and like insights into a problem, etc. So I'm just always curious. I have two questions. So first question is, how, let's say if you work in Trainline, would a person who has like 20 years of expertise in the train industry have more insights than you as an outsider who knows the patterns of you know, the data? Perhaps you guys work together, but let's say if I can just pick one, you know, do I pick the more experienced guy or do I pick a data scientist? And the second question is, from your experience, I know data scientists come from a range of background, and you know, not many people have that degree or like software developer and so on. So, from your lifetime, who are the best data scientists that you've met, and what are their background, and how do they get there?
Thank you very much.
Trainline specifically. I don't know if you've ever talked to a rail enthusiast, but they're actually. They're actually very, very interesting people, and they have got an impressive wealth of knowledge about how this system works, because it's incredibly complicated. What I would say is, if you had to choose one, I'm not going to say if you could, I'm not going to choose one or the other. What I would say though is that both of them together would work very, like, if you give the data to the data scientist, they could spend a long time learning what the data is telling them, and they would be able to work out eventually what all the nuances are. If you just had the expert in the rail, then he can't really use the data. But if you put the two of them together, then they can alleviate all of those pains initially and create something that's much more beneficial to the customer. And the data scientist has the engineering skills to be able to push that out and actually affect people's journeys. So over the course of a month, 11 million different people use our app. And yes, we have a team full of rail experts, but they have an engineering team to help them develop the ideas that they have to push that out. So it can't really be one or the other, it kind of would have to be both.
I've got, is there, by the way, we're going to be up here, is there any way I could get a beer from that fridge up here? Thank you, that's fantastic. I would say, is that really cheeky? Sorry. Okay, who else wants a beer up the front? Anyone? Okay, what I would say is, having worked in transport for the last 2 years, I would always pick the data scientist over someone with 20 years experience in the rail industry, because the rail industry is quite backward in terms of what it does with data. I think Trainline are the exception to that rule. But yeah, I think I liken it to, has anyone seen the film or read the book Moneyball? That's what the rail industry is like. They know what they know because it's always been that way. Oh, thank you. Can I have a Peroni, please? Is that all right? Thank you. Can I set up a tab? Thanks. Cheers. Okay. I feel really cheeky now. Would you mind taking my empty? Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So yeah, I would liken the rail industry to the baseball industry out of Moneyball, in that it just knows what it knows. And it took someone like Billy Bean coming in and making data-related decisions to shake it up.
I'll add just very to this. I pretty much 100% agree with these guys. Maybe be a bit in between. I would also get both, because the experiences complement each other quite well. The only thing perhaps is the domain expert that's been in the industry for 15 years might have some ideas which are not then supported by the data. And this is something which has been seen, it's been disastrous in the medical field particularly, where doctors know better and they wouldn't for very long times believe what the randomized control trials told them. So this is definitely a thing. It's perhaps less strong now because data is everywhere, but it's definitely still there.
Thank you. We've got 4 questions, and what we're going to do is whichever panellist feels most empowered to answer it, they're going to give their view, okay? Because we're running out of Trainline's time. £10 a question? We've been paying you in Peroni, that's what we've been doing. Right, 4 questions, 4 answers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, here you go.
Hi, so once you have your data and you've eventually cleaned it, how much time do you devote to developing hypotheses, identifying the right algorithms, or asking the right questions of your data before you actually get into it? And how important is it?
Anybody? So that leaves 2.
Again, I guess it depends on where you are. At the moment, as I said, the data I receive is mostly clean, so I spend 80% of my time actually modeling. It depends on your timelines, what you want to achieve. A simple model you can get up and running to have at least an idea of what your performance should be. Say, I don't know, classification task, a logistic regression model you can set up in scikit-learn in 5 minutes. So that shouldn't take very long as a baseline, as I said, and then go from there, build from there till you reach the point. There's also, I guess, some circularity to this. Going back to the data in the modeling stage, you might find that you actually needed something, and there's a going back, asking for more data, or perhaps generating more data and then inputting it back into the model. But from my experience, which is not quite what happens, I guess, in the rest of the industry, is a lot of modeling and not so much data cleaning. I guess this is reversed for most roles.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. 3 left. Come on.
Thank you. My question is more related to how to move between careers, let's say. Let's say that you are a DBA, a database developer, and a statistician, and you want to go into the big data or data science. What's the path that you will reckon the first step to make? Because of course you are specializing in SPSS, SQL Server, Oracle, and we are talking about Hadoop, Stata. I'm missing a middle point. I don't know how to move between one and the other.
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. Come on, Tom. I got this. He's got it.
I'm actually going to do a bit of. I'm going to answer this question. I went to PyData 2016, and there was a magnificent talk by a girl called Tetiana Ivanova, who gave an amazing presentation on how to hack your data science career in 6 months. And what she did, she went from having very little experience in mathematics and data science, learning it over the course of 6 months, and actually getting a job at a kind of really super awesome tech startup. and I now think she's doing a fellowship in America. And she will, if you watch that presentation, PyData 2016, Tetiana Ivanova, that will answer all of your questions. So you're welcome. What I would say from a personal perspective is that there's so much good information out there in terms of how to learn something like Python. If you haven't learnt, if you're coming from a different software package to something like Python or R, I can guarantee you Python or R, you're going to love it a lot more than the one you do now. You just have to kind of get involved, make a plan for how you're going to do it. And the other thing I would say is think about what you want to do and why you want to do it. What bits of the job interest you, and kind of focus on those, really.
Cheers, Tom. Here we go, next to each other. This made it easy. There you go.
Hi there. You talked a lot about domain expertise. What do you think is best in the long term? To have deep domain expertise in one or a few sectors, or to have more experience over a breadth of different sectors?
Thank you very much. Fergus. Perfect.
How long is a piece of string, really? It depends. If you've got a passion about something, then obviously you're going to specialize in one. So you could specialize in financial services, or you could specialize in healthcare. I would say, like, if you're going to cover, if I was to see somebody with a CV that had financial experience and also healthcare experience, and maybe they've worked in an algorithmic betting firm experience, I'd be thinking, well, why isn't this guy setting up a consultancy, really? That's really the only, right now, I think, in the long term, is the only reason why you would gather quite a wide berth of expertise. Because once you get into the financial industry or the healthcare industry, once you're in there, the kind of sub-trees of what you can, of the different data types in there, are actually quite wide as well. So you could actually specialize even further if you were just to specialize in healthcare, because there's so many different data sources across so many different data sets that it's kind of hard to answer that, really.
Thank you very much. Last question. The pressure. Hey. Come on.
Thank you very much. So back to this question about domain knowledge, how to get that domain knowledge, and how much actually you can get of that domain knowledge to say that now I can get into that specific sector or industry.
Has this been delegated, or did you volunteer?
There's kind of 4 core areas for data science. There's stats and maths, there's programming, hacking, machine learning. There's domain knowledge and business acumen, domain expertise. And then there's kind of storytelling and communication skills. In those 4 quadrants, you don't have to have an equal weighting. So if you had 0 domain knowledge, I didn't know about trains before I got into Trainline, right? But I had enough expertise in the other 3 areas that I could sell myself as an individual who could learn that. And it goes back to the first presentation to say that you kind of have to have an open mind to continue learning, because that's what we're always doing. You know, you're always going to get a new data set where you're going to have to ask the questions and that you're going to learn new things from. So you don't necessarily need domain knowledge, but if you're an expert banker and you want to move into algorithmic banking, but you have no storytelling skills, well, then that's okay. Or if you are a pure statistician who's worked in bioinformatics and has got no hacking skills or no programming skills or no software engineering skills, that's still okay. You can still, as long as you can demonstrate that you can learn those skills, and what I would say is be open and upfront that you just don't know, or you don't have the skill set, and then communicate effectively that you're willing to learn those skills.
Thank you very much. Thank you much to all of you for some questions. I think it feels like it's been a success. I feel like we could stay longer and talk more, so that's good. I'd like to say a big thank you to the 3 panellists here, Fergus, Tom and Gianluca. Thanks for giving up your time and sharing with us. A round of applause, please.